Music is such an underappreciated aspect of video games as a whole, but especially in Five Nights at Freddy's where every sound, track, or even step is meant to invoke fear. I'm not sitting here saying that Five Nights at Freddy's has innovative, sweeping, spine-chilling tracks, but what I am saying is that it works very well for what the game wants to do, which is usually about atmosphere and tone setting. Let's take a dive into Five Nights at Freddy's soundtracks over the years to see why they do, or do not work. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 only has a few tracks, which work wonders for the game's tone, which is a child's entertainment place turned horror house. You definitely know one of the tracks by heart, but the others are not the main menu music. The menu is just a standard track with a screen that screws up face cams, not much to really talk about there. I'm not going to mention the main menu music usually, as it's kind of standard and gets the job done, but doesn't do anything outstanding. No, I'm referring to the circus pipe organ and giant hollow tube sector. Links in the description if you want to know more about the soundtracks for all these games. Giant Hollow Tube Sector actually has gameplay functionality, which I did not know before making this video. Subconsciously it always felt like it did, but you had no real idea because you were a little preoccupied. The closer they get, the louder the music. The tune is meant to keep you on edge and keep you distracted from the threats around you. It's meant to keep that heart rate up on your first playthrough as you panic in a fit to manage your power and sense of awareness. I wouldn't say this music has anything more than that going for it though. It's atmosphere, but effective for what it is. Circus pipe organ on the other hand is a different beast. This music plays at random and has no gameplay connection, but what it does do is reinforce the tone of the game. This is a children's pizzeria, so circus music isn't exactly out of place in that regard, but Five Nights at Freddy's is meant to turn that nostalgic feeling into horror, much like the animatronics themselves. Circus pipe organ reminds you that this is supposed to be a place of joy for children, much like a carnival, but instead, you're in a death trap. That jingle is no longer a sound of happiness, but death. It feels so out of place in the situation, but not the setting, so it still remains scary in that regard. So while it is still atmosphere, it's atmosphere that matches the tone of the setting, and further roots that in your mind. It's pretty great, but of course, there's one more track left. This music is synonymous with Freddy Fazbear himself, being the theme that plays when your power runs out. Again, the music box just sounds like something that you would play for kids, but in this case, it's to remind you that this child-friendly mascot isn't here for fun times. I know I said I wouldn't mention main menu music, but this one's kind of a bop, I'm not gonna lie. Moving on. There's not much to talk about with this one, but I do want to bring up two different tracks. The first is the scary sirens that play. Like FNaF 1, this does serve a gameplay function. If an animatronic is in the hall in front of you or outside one of the vents, this warning siren plays. I'm not actually the biggest fan of this noise, and heck, I love this game to death. It does do a good job of making the player needlessly panic the first time you hear it, similar to Giant Hollow Tube Sector from the first game. But honestly, it's just noise. It doesn't fit the tone or the setting. It's just a warning siren. It's good at first, but it ends up getting annoying. Nothing wrong with the warning sound as FNaF 1 did, but I wish it were something a little more subtle. Either a different carnival tune or maybe another animatronic noise would have worked way better than just ba-wah, ba-wah. But there is a diamond here in terms of music. The puppet music box. Now the idle music itself is just normal creepy. It's nothing super frightening, but it has an ominous feel to it. It's telling you there's a threat that you don't want to get out, while still maintaining that sense of unease that comes with child-friendly nature of the tune itself, as I mentioned with the previous game. But once you let that music box go too long, well, yeah, I don't think I need to say much about Pop Goes the Weasel music. It's imminent danger, it's peril, it's death. Now FNaF 3 is where the music has to do a little more heavy lifting because, well, yeah. The base ambiance track, Desolate Underworld, is the first time we've heard music play 24/7 in the game itself. And it's alright, but it doesn't really add much considering the game gives you the first night for free for some background info. You have plenty of time to really listen and get familiar with the track before danger even approaches? So that begs the question then, what's the point of the music? It can't be only for atmosphere because it plays while you're safe on night 1. It has no gameplay connections, it just plays. Again, the music is good on its own, but in this situation it has no other purpose than to be ear filler. A distraction. That's all this music is, a distraction. From all the other sounds. Not that it even does that particularly well, considering how loud the sounds are anyways. Now look, I'm biased against FNAF 3, but I actually went into this video expecting FNAF 3 to come out on top in the music department, but this music has no purpose outside just sounding a bit generic on its own. Now the next track does have purpose. It's a simple danger track with a similar purpose to the sirens in FNAF 2. It warns you of phantoms or if Springtrap is in Cam 1, 2, or outside the office. I haven't tried this myself, but I can picture this actually being a useful tool. Granted, the sound is annoying, but at least it's useful. Considering part of the gameplay loop is just knowing where the enemy is in the first place, this is appreciated. But again, why are these sounds so annoying? Now, I do want to mention the minigame music because, believe it or not, these will come into play for the franchise's future. What's important is that the music for these were always very slow, creepy, but still having that music box vibe to it. Some of them were even downright spooky. They were meant to set up the tone for the story they were telling. Whether the music was slow, sad, nostalgic, or anywhere on that spectrum, these minigames did a great job of looking innocent while just being creepy, and that's all thanks to the music. Okay, so FNAF 4 does share a similar issue to FNAF 3, but first I do want to point you to the main menu music for the original release. This matches the setting so well because the style of horror isn't the same as the first two games. This works incredibly well to build tension before the game even starts. This is how you use high-pitched noises FNAF 2 and 3. I just love how it's a lot more simplistic and how it's menacing, but not loud, especially since the game takes place in a house, with you all alone. It feels like more of a core survival fear than the other games did. Anyways, the main ambient track for this game does constantly play in the background. Yes, the key difference is in the gameplay. My critique of FNAF 3's track mainly had to do with how pointless it was, not because the track was actually bad. In FNAF 4, however, the importance of sound is crucial. Any noise distraction is a huge disadvantage in this game. I'm not talking about Bonnie or Chica's breathing only. You can hear footsteps, Foxy rushes back and forth, you can even hear the little Freddles behind you if they get a little too antsy. With that said, does the soundtrack serve its purpose well? Yes. With new elements of the game being introduced, little sounds that may just be part of the soundtrack may or may not make you do a double take. Heck, just playing the game for this video made me keep thinking I was hearing footsteps that weren't there. In FNAF 3 this wouldn't matter because the game is more about sight than sound, and the sounds are incredibly obvious. But in FNAF 4, anything helps build an uncertainty in a game that already keeps you on your toes better than most games in the franchise. But if I'm being honest, I would like to try FNAF 3 and 4 without any music. Just to see how it hits, like, I really want to feel that, I'm really curious. Okay, relatively mixed bag so far, but Sister Location has the most varied soundtrack by far. I'm going to talk about the gameplay music first though. But to be honest, that kind of limits our options, which is not a bad thing. Many sections of this game don't need music. Imagine if Funtime Foxy had music. That would kind of kill the tension. Same with Parts and Service, but let's talk about what we do have. Obviously we have Crumbling Dreams, the music that plays during Ballora's section. It works quite well and feels like a callback to that unsettling style of childish music from the first two games. Like, yeah, you'd expect a ballerina to dance to something like this, I guess, but said ballerina is trying to kill you and is also a robot. And also talks, making the music so much creepier. Music boxes seem to be an easy formula now that I think about it. The music works for obvious reasons, but if Crumbling Dreams were playing through the whole section, I think it would disconnect Ballora's presence from the scale of the room you're in. But at the same time, the game does make this section pretty easy with the music range. Despite how much music is in this game, we only have one more that shows up in gameplay. There are other tracks, but they're more like ambient noises, not music. So let's talk about Watch Your 6, the music that plays when you can't actually watch your 6. Weird. This is basically the entered boss fight music. For what's essentially a Five Nights at Freddy's boss night and callback, the bassy thumps work really well to reflect the danger you're in. Considering this is a special occasion in the game and that this is a callback to the older game's style of play, I think it's okay to have music here. The focus has kind of shifted. It's no longer about just being distracting. The music has a more cinematic role to play here, whereas in the older games, it had to have a purpose because you'd be doing 5 nights of this crap. We can't have the music getting old before the game lands its point. But here, the atmosphere is the point. Whether you win or lose doesn't matter. You want to feel that original sense of danger all over again. With the more rustic and metallic noises coming from this game, it does set a whole new sense of fear in you and the music reflects that. So let's talk about the rest of the music. I'm gonna bunch it all into one section because it all serves the same purpose. That purpose is to be so tonally different from the horror that the horror is amplified. When you feel safe, it's probably thanks to the music and jingles. The casual bongos, the night jingles, the soap opera. It all has an element of safety to it, so when you don't hear anything a little more cheery or even stupid in the case of the hand unit, you hear nothing. And that's perfect. I love this game to death, and every time I analyze it, I find more reasons to love it. Music is one of those elements. Okay, remember when I said those FNaF 3 minigames would be important? Well, here we are. Almost the whole soundtrack for Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is based on the minigame style of music. It's all this retro, happy sounding music. Even the lawsuit music comes off as a vibe. And you're getting sued. Groovy gravy, 4 bits to the left, 240 bits per mile. It's all fun music until the final cutscene, which is climactic, epic, and slow. Absolute peak. The only real thing to talk about here is the tone, which is similar to Sister Location in that you go from 100% safety to complete danger in a matter of seconds. Going from the Tycoon to the office is night and day. You have all this fun, cheery music, and then dead silence once again. It's very well done, even if I would like a little more implicative music. Something to distinguish one of the animatronics, kind of like Freddy in the kitchen for FNaF 1. But overall, for a game that's so sound dependent, no music was a good choice for the gameplay, and I'm glad the game picked up the slack by having so many tracks in the Tycoon section. One last note on the final cutscene. This track was kind of perfect, because it's not a joyous event. Sure, we win, and the souls are put to rest, but so are Henry and our character. It's bittersweet, and the song reflects finality. But it doesn't try to pretend that Five Nights at Freddy's isn't a tragic story at heart. It's slow, it's somber, melancholy at best, but it's intense enough to give this scene the respect it deserves. There's a reason everyone loves this cutscene, and while Henry's speech is part of it, let's not also forget the soundtrack. Help Wanted definitely knew what kind of tone it wanted to set, and I think it passed with flying colors. Help Wanted took a 180 from Pizzeria Simulator not because of its music only, but the tone. When the tone changes, so does the music. If it doesn't, people notice big time. Even then, there's really only 2 tracks I want to cover. The main menu and the hub. If Remake 4 and Twisted Butterfly don't scream, "You're being watched," I don't know what does. That's the thing about the music in this game. You are being watched and it feels like it. Glitchtrap is right there and he's up to something. This slow, ominous music is perfect at making you dread what's going to happen next. Considering this is a VR game, I think that about sums up the music perfectly. What I'd like to point out is that the instrument usage, mainly the music box, is perfect for the setting, which goes back to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You're back in the setting that started it all, and the music reflects that. But with the added weight and dread of Glitchtrap. It feels like when someone slows down a normal song and just makes you uncomfortable. Leaning more into the terror was definitely the way to go for Help Wanted. But now...
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Come on, how can you hate a soundtrack that starts with that? Okay, but in all seriousness, this game has a lot of unique tracks, but there's actually not many to talk about. None of the music is bad, but most of it is either standard horror atmosphere or music that's only related to the location you're in. Like, oh, this song plays in Fazer Blast, or this song plays in Monty Golf. You know, nothing substantial to the game itself. But I might as well mention these tracks as well as the one playing now. These are perfect for what they do, even if what they do isn't for the sake of horror. It's meant to immerse you in this place and what it's supposed to be. For that, they do a good job. Unlike a few other locations in this game, you can kinda see the appeal to children and why they'd want to be here, unlike the first 2 games' locations with their puppets and uncanny robots. So the music is really good at establishing that tone, but obviously the game can't just do that, so let's move on. Other than the very generic tracks sprinkled through the game, there's really only 2 to discuss, only because they kinda conflict. The daycare music. On the one hand, I get what they're going for, but on the other hand, it's just too much, man. This is kid friendliness turned up to 11, and it feels kinda off-putting. I feel like toddlers themselves would eventually get sick of this track. So it works, but maybe a little too much. But it is tonally what the game is going for, so it could be worse. But right after this, we have the Moon boss fight, which is just bland. Why is his music not thematically in line with the daycare? We could have had this creepy hybrid of like the joyous daycare music, but corrupted. That old feeling in the first two games of something that sounds familiar but is just wrong. In fact, none of the tracks really do this in the whole game. Again, most of it sounds generic, albeit catchy on their own terms. The only track that leans into the theme is, oddly enough, the main menu music, but even then it's the opposite problem the daycare has, where it sounds a little too creepy for how scary the game actually is. It's so much slower and more deliberate in its horror tone, the game only barely fits it. It feels more like it belongs in ruin. Overall, Security Breach has a decent soundtrack, but it definitely didn't know what to do with itself, just like the game. Okay, so we have to skip Help Wanted 2 because I'm hearing a lot of remixing and not many unique tracks. The Carousel song is great for the time you hear it, but it's not worth a whole section. It's carousel music. We've kind of discussed all that already, so I'm going to skip over to Secret of the Mimic. Now, we get our most recent release, Secret of the Mimic. The first thing we have to remember is that this game's tone is very different from previous releases, so the music has to match it in order to be effective. Upon listening to the music over again, I can confidently say that they did. Now granted, the problem isn't so much matching the tone of the music, it's the game itself and the timing. The music leans way more into the carnival side of things, which makes sense given the time period and the lore of the games. In fact, the songs sound better on their own than they do in the game. Your mind can't really process the music while you're being chased, because you're being chased. So regardless of how fitting the music is, you could probably replace it and the average player wouldn't notice. Meanwhile, in the original games, and even Help Wanted, it's very hard to not notice which song is playing because the games are slower and more deliberate. With chase scenes happening all the time, the focus isn't on terror, it's an immediate fear. I'm not trying to review the game again, but I'm saying all this for music's sake. Music is at its best when it's used as a subconscious fear, but when you're too distracted with visual fear, the music doesn't matter as much, or at least the tone doesn't. Again, any song could work with the chase sequences. With all that said, Steelwool nailed the music in this game on its own, and it's not the music guys' fault that the game direction was a bit generic. But when the music hits, it hits perfectly. Like during the Ticket Salesman Big Top section where stealth is more the focus, the carnival theme was done very well as a perfect match for the setting. Maybe not the art style, but that's a story for another day. Great job from Steelwool's music guys for matching the tone of this game perfectly. I mean, I feel like not a single song is out of place in this game. Five Nights at Freddy's never truly forgot what it was, at least in the music department. It always remembered to match the uncanny valley with the appropriate music. It had its flops, especially 3 and Security Breach, but even they have their bright spots. I've enjoyed taking a look at these tracks, and I hope you did too. I was kind of expecting more flops than we ended up getting, so hey, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. So, thank you for watching, do all the YouTube stuff, see you later. Yeet.